The ventilation system of Threshold Station wheezed like a dying animal, pushing stale air through corridors that reeked of hydraulic fluid and desperation. Marcus Reed dragged himself through the crowded market district, his right knee throbbing from an old injury that never quite healed right. The worn leather jacket he'd salvaged from a derelict freighter 3 months ago hung loose on his shoulders. He'd lost weight since then. Food had become a luxury he couldn't always afford. His calloused fingers found the credit chip in his pocket, turning it over and over like a worry stone. 2,300 credits. The sum total of 6 weeks hauling cargo between rim stations, barely enough to refuel his ship and buy provisions for another month. If he was lucky, Marcus checked the time on his cracked wrist display. The parts dealer he'd been hoping to meet had stood him up, probably found a buyer willing to pay more than Marcus could scrape together. Story of his life these days. 3 years ago, he'd been running a profitable transport business with a crew of 5, in a ship that didn't sound like it was tearing itself apart every time he engaged the engines. Then came the trade route collapse, the mounting debts, the crew abandoning him one by one. Now he was alone, flying a rust bucket called the Wanderer's Hope, a name that felt more ironic with each passing day. The market pressed in around him, traders hawking stolen goods, information brokers muttering in shadowed alcoves, and the ever-present scent of alien food stalls mixing into an overwhelming miasma. Marcus shouldered past a group of Tarkelian merchants arguing over ore prices, their scales gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. He was about to head back to his docking bay when a voice crackled through the market's public address. System. Final call for bidders in Section 19. Specialty merchandise. Last chance for interested parties. Section 19. Marcus's jaw tightened. That was deep in the gray market territory, where station security conveniently never patrolled, and the goods for sale skirted the edge of a dozen laws. He'd avoided that area for good reason, nothing there but trouble, but something made him change course. Maybe it was the boredom, or the rebellious part of him that refused to become completely numb to the universe's darkness. He told himself he was just curious, that he'd take a look and keep walking. The crowd thinned as he approached Section 19, replaced by a different sort of clientele. Harder faces, eyes that assessed threats and opportunities with equal coldness. Marcus kept his hand near the plasma pistol hidden beneath his jacket. Not that it would do much good if things went sideways, but the weight of it was comforting. A makeshift auction platform had been erected in a cargo bay, surrounded by perhaps 24 potential buyers. On the platform stood a massive Krellian with mottled crimson skin and forearms, each ending in claws that clicked together as he gestured. "Gentlemen and others," the Krellian's voice boomed. "I am Vorgith, and I offer you treasures most rare. Velani juveniles, freshly acquired, in prime condition." Marcus's stomach dropped. 4 small figures stood on the platform, their heads covered with rough cloth sacks. Even through the covering, Marcus could see their delicate builds, the way they trembled. The Velani were a peaceful species from the inner colonies, known for their iridescent skin that shifted colors with their emotions. Their homeworld had been caught in a corporate war 5 years ago, and the survivors had scattered across the galaxy. "These 4 sisters," Vorgith continued, circling the children like a predator, "are young enough to be trained, old enough to be useful. Velani make excellent servants, obedient, empathic, and remarkably resilient." One of the smaller figures stumbled, and immediately the tallest reached out to steady her. Despite the rough handling from Vorgith's assistant, "We'll be splitting them into pairs," Vorgith announced. "More profit that way. Bidding starts at 1,500 credits per pair." 1,800, called a hulking figure in the crowd. A Borzic mercenary with cybernetic implants gleaming in the dim light. 2,000, countered someone else. Marcus felt sick. He should leave. This wasn't his problem. He had his own survival to worry about, and getting involved in this kind of business was a good way to end up dead or worse. The galaxy was full of injustices. One person couldn't fix them all. But then he heard a soft, muffled sob from beneath one of the sacks. The smallest figure was crying, trying to be quiet, failing. The tallest one pulled her closer, and even through the obscuring fabric, Marcus could see the protective embrace. Sisters. They were going to separate sisters. 2,500 for the tall ones, the Borzik growled, clearly pleased with himself. Excellent bid, Vorgith purred. Any others before, 3,000. Marcus's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd before he'd consciously decided to speak. For all four. Every head turned toward him. The silence stretched thin and dangerous. Vorgith's eyes, all three of them, focused on Marcus with predatory interest. The human wishes to bid? How amusing. The price for all four would be no less than 5,000, surely. 3,000 is what I have, Marcus said, pulling out his credit chip. It wasn't true. He had 2,300, not 3,000, but he'd figure that out if he had to. Take it or I report this whole operation to the Colonial Authority. It was a hollow threat, and everyone there knew it, but Vorgith's expression flickered with annoyance. Bad publicity could complicate his business relationships. You dare threaten me, human? Vorgith's forearms flexed, claws extending. Not a threat. Just business. Marcus kept his voice steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. You want to spend the next week dealing with inspectors, or you want to make a sale and move on. The Borzik mercenary stepped forward. The human interrupts legitimate commerce. I had the winning bid. 2,800 for all four, Marcus countered, gambling everything now. Final offer. For a long moment, no one moved. Marcus could feel sweat trickling down his spine. If Vorgith called his bluff, he was done for. Hell, even if the Krellian accepted, Marcus wasn't sure where he'd get the extra 500 credits. Vorgith's middle eye twitched. Then, surprisingly, he laughed a sound like grinding metal. Very well, human. Your passion is entertaining. 2,800 for all four, and you leave immediately. Marcus approached the platform on shaking legs, extending his credit chip. As Vorgith verified the balance, Marcus became aware of multiple hostile stares burning into his back. He'd just made enemies of everyone here. The transaction completed, Vorgith gestured dismissively toward the children. Take your purchases and go. And human? The Krellian leaned close, his breath reeking of sulfur. Watch your back. You've upset some very dangerous people today. Marcus carefully removed the sacks from each girl's head. 4 pairs of eyes stared up at him, large, luminous, and shifting through colors he had no names for. Violet fading to amber, silver bleeding into rose. Their skin was like polished opal, refracting light in subtle patterns. The tallest couldn't have been more than 13 in human years. The smallest was perhaps 6. They looked terrified. It's okay, Marcus said softly, kneeling down to their level despite the protest from his bad knee. I'm Marcus. I'm going to get you out of here. All of you, together. The tallest girl studied him with ancient eyes that had seen far too much. Why would you help us? Her voice was barely audible, musical even in its fear. Marcus didn't have a good answer. He'd just spent everything he had, more than everything, on 4 alien children he couldn't feed, couldn't shelter, couldn't protect. It was the stupidest thing he'd ever done. Because nobody else would, he finally said, offering his hand. What are your names? I'm Nira, the tallest replied, hesitantly taking his hand. Her skin was warm, and where she touched him, he felt a strange flutter of emotion. Her emotion, he realized. Fear and fragile hope mixing together. These are my sisters. Tessa, Myra, and little Kova. The smallest one, Kova, reached up toward Marcus with both arms. Without thinking, he scooped her up, and she immediately buried her face against his shoulder. "We need to move," Marcus said, feeling the weight of hostile eyes still upon them. "Stay close to me?" As they hurried toward the exit, Marcus caught sight of the Borzik mercenary speaking into a device, his expression murderous. Yeah, this was going to get complicated. Behind them, Vorgoth's laughter echoed through the cargo bay, promising that this wasn't over. Marcus held Kova a little tighter and quickened his pace. He had no plan, no money, and 4 lives depending on him now. What the hell have I gotten myself into? The maintenance corridors of Threshold Station were Marcus's salvation and his curse. He knew them better than most, after 3 years of scraping by on the station's margins. But right now, that knowledge was the only thing keeping them alive. The Valani sisters followed close behind him, Kova still clutched in his arms, while Nira held tight to her younger sister's hands. "Where are we going?" Nira whispered, her voice trembling. "Docking Bay 12, Marcus replied, scanning ahead for threats. "My ship's there. If we can reach it before—" A burst of plasma fire scorched the wall beside his head, sending sparks cascading across the narrow passage. Marcus threw himself sideways, shielding Kova with his body while pulling the girls into a side corridor. "Found you, human." The Borzik mercenary's voice boomed from behind them, accompanied by the heavy thud of boots on metal grating. Marcus's mind raced. Bay 12 was 3 sections away, and they'd never make it with a professional killer on their heels. He needed a miracle, or at least a distraction. What he got was something in between. "This way." A female voice called from an intersecting passage ahead. "Quickly." Marcus hesitated, every instinct screaming that trusting strangers was how you ended up dead. But plasma fire chewed through the corridor behind them, and Kova was whimpering against his chest, her fear flooding through some empathic connection he didn't understand. He made his choice. They rounded the corner to find a woman, standing before a concealed access panel, her hand pressed against what looked like solid wall. She was tall and slender, her skin a luminous silver blue that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Long hair the color of starlight cascaded past her shoulders, and her eyes were an impossible shade of violet that seemed to see right through him. She wore a form-fitting suit of deep indigo that had a subtle iridescent sheen, and moved with a fluid grace that marked her as something other than human. "Inside." "Now," she commanded, and the wall slid open to reveal a hidden passage. Marcus didn't need to be told twice. He ducked through the opening with the girls, and their mysterious rescuer followed, the panel sealing behind them with barely a whisper of sound. The passage was dark and narrow, lit only by emergency strips that cast everything in shades of amber. Marcus could hear the mercenary's frustrated roar from the other side, muffled but clear enough to understand the creative threats being made. "He can't follow," the woman said calmly. "These passages require diplomatic clearance to access." "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, finally setting Kova down, but keeping himself between the girls and this stranger. She turned those violet eyes on him, and he felt a strange flutter in his chest that had nothing to do with the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "My name is Sarah Windhaven," she said. "I'm Stellarian, and you're Marcus Reed, cargo hauler, currently operating a deteriorating freighter called the Wanderer's Hope, and apparently now the owner of 4 Velani, children you purchased from Vorgoth the Cruel for more credits than you actually possessed." Marcus blinked. "How do you—" "I've been tracking Vorgoth's operations for 6 months," Sira interrupted, moving deeper into the passage and gesturing for them to follow. "He's part of a larger network that specializes in trafficking empathic species. When I saw you outbid that Borzik thug, I knew you'd need help leaving the station alive." "Empathic species?" Marcus asked, following her through the winding corridor, while trying not to notice how the emergency lighting made her skin shimmer like liquid silver. Vellani, cerulean lumen species, capable of sensing and sharing emotions, Sarah explained, navigating turns without hesitation. They're valuable on the black market. Some want them as servants who can anticipate needs. Others, her expression darkened, others want to study them, extract their abilities for military applications. Marcus felt Kova's small hand slip into his, and a wave of trust and affection washed through him that definitely wasn't his own emotion. He looked down at the little girl, whose opalescent skin was shifting through shades of soft blue and silver. "She's bonding with you," Nira said quietly, wonder in her voice. That's not supposed to be possible with humans." "What does that mean?" Marcus asked, alarmed. "It means," Sarah said, glancing back at them with an unreadable expression, "that you're more than just a good Samaritan." Marcus read, "There's something about you that resonates with her on a level most species can't reach." They emerged into a different section of the station, entirely one Marcus had never seen before. Clean corridors with actual plants growing in hydroponics installations, soft lighting that didn't give you a headache, and security drones that patrolled with quiet efficiency. "Diplomatic quarter," Sarah explained. "Vorgeth's people won't risk an incident here. We're safe for the moment." She led them to a private docking bay, and Marcus stopped dead at the sight of her ship. It was nothing like the battered freighters and military surplus vessels that usually populated the station. The hull gleamed with the same iridescent quality as Sarah's suit, its lines elegant and purposeful, like a piece of living art. "The Celestial Dawn," Sarah said with evident pride. "My home, and now your sanctuary." "I can't accept," Marcus began. "You don't have a choice," Sarah interrupted, turning to face him. "Vorgeth has already put a bounty on your head. Every criminal, bounty hunter, and mercenary within 3 systems will be looking for you and those girls. Your ship is barely flight-worthy. You have no credits, and no safe port." She stepped closer, and Marcus became acutely aware of how much taller she was than him, of the subtle fragrance that surrounded her like night-blooming flowers, of the intensity in those violet eyes. "I'm offering you a way out," she said softly. "For them, if not for yourself." Marcus looked at the 4 sisters, huddled together and watching this exchange with fearful hope playing across their color-shifting features. Kova was still holding his hand, her small fingers wrapped tight around his calloused ones. "Why are you helping us?" he asked, meeting Sarah's gaze. "What's in this for you?" Something flickered across her face pane, perhaps, or memory. The Stellarians and Vellani share ancient bonds. Our peoples were allies before the wars came. When their world fell, many refugees made it to our territories, but many more were intercepted by slavers. Her jaw tightened. "I lost someone to traffickers like Vorgeth. Someone I couldn't save. Maybe I can save them instead." The raw honesty in her voice disarmed Marcus completely. He found himself nodding before he'd consciously made the decision. "Okay," he said, "but I'm not charity. I pull my weight." A smile tugged at the corner of Sarah's lips. "I wouldn't expect anything less. Now, come on. We need to be gone before Vorgeth realizes where you went." The interior of the Celestial Dawn was as impressive as its exterior. Soft lighting that automatically adjusted to a spectrum easier on Vellani eyes. Sleeping quarters that felt spacious rather than cramped. And a common area with actual cushions instead of metal benches. "There's a cabin with 4 bunks for the girls," Sarah said, directing them down a corridor. "Food synthesizer is programmed for multiple species, including Vellani dietary requirements." Marcus helped the sisters settle in, making sure they understood how the facilities worked. Tessa and Mira were wide-eyed with wonder, touching everything with tentative fingers. Nira maintained her protective vigilance, but even she seemed to relax slightly in the ship's welcoming atmosphere. Kova refused to let go of Marcus's hand until Nira gently coaxed her into one of the bunks. Even then, the little girl's eyes followed Marcus, her skin shifting through shades of blue that he was beginning to recognize as contentment mixed with worry. "Rest now," Marcus said softly. "You're safe here. I promise." After the girls had finally settled, Marcus found Sierra in the cockpit, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as she prepared for departure. The space was intimate, designed for a single pilot, and Marcus had to stand close to her to see the displays. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." "I know you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Sierra interrupted, not looking away from her work. "Some things you do because you have to, because not doing them would mean losing a piece of yourself." Her words resonated with something deep in Marcus's chest. He watched her pilot with practiced precision, noting the economy of her movements, the focused intensity in her expression. She was beautiful in a way that transcended mere physical appearance. There was strength there, and purpose, and a kind of lonely determination he recognized all too well. "Where are we headed?" he asked. "The Cascade Nebula," Sarah replied, setting navigation coordinates. "There's a place there hidden. A refuge I established for situations exactly like this." "You've done this before," Marcus realized. "Rescued people from traffickers." 13 times in the last 2 years, she confirmed, finally turning to look at him. "Sometimes I succeed. Sometimes—" She trailed off, pain flickering across her features. Without thinking, Marcus reached out and gently touched her arm. The contact sent a jolt through him, not the empathic connection he'd felt with Kova, but something equally profound. Simple human attraction, made electric by circumstance and proximity. Sierra's eyes widened slightly, her lips parting in surprise. For a moment, they were frozen there, close enough that Marcus could see flecks of gold in her violet irises, could feel the warmth radiating from her luminous skin. "Marcus," she whispered, his name like music in her voice. The ship lurched as it disengaged from the docking clamps, breaking the spell. They both pulled back, professional distance reasserting itself, but something had shifted between them. An acknowledgement of possibility dot as the celestial dawn glided away from Threshold Station. Marcus allowed himself a moment to breathe. Behind them, danger and enemies. Ahead, uncertainty and 1,000 unanswered questions. But beside him stood a woman who'd risked everything to help strangers. And sleeping in the cabin were 4 children who now depended on them both. "Tell me about this refuge," Marcus said, settling into the co-pilot's seat. Sarah smiled, and the expression transformed her face from merely beautiful to radiant. "It's a place where broken things can heal," she said, "where people who've lost their way can find themselves again." "Sounds like exactly where I need to be," Marcus admitted. She glanced at him, violet eyes warm. "I think you've been finding your way all along. Marcus Reed, you just didn't realize it until today." As stars stretched past the viewport and the celestial dawn carried them toward whatever future awaited, Marcus felt Kova's presence brush against his mind, a gentle reminder that some bonds transcend species. That compassion creates connections, stronger than any chain dot, and when Sierra's hand found his on the armrest between their seats, fingers intertwining with casual intimacy, Marcus realized that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't lost everything after all. Maybe he'd finally found something worth holding on to.